One of the questions I just get so often is, do you read? And the answer to that is complicated. I literally just made a video about whether or not listening to audiobooks is reading, and I sort of landed on the I don't think it's reading side, which poses a problem for me when people ask me, do you read? Because, a huge part of my identity is as a reader. My name is Seth, and I'm a full-time fantasy author. I make YouTube videos about writing and about being an author, and really just a bunch of other random stuff. So if that's the kind of thing you're into, definitely hit the subscribe button, because I'm going to have a lot of great content for you. So this question of do you read is a tricky one. Because like I said, I don't think that audiobooks are reading, but I mostly just listen to audiobooks. And the other thing is that they're mostly nonfiction. When I say I listen to nonfiction audiobooks, I mean I listen to a lot of nonfiction audiobooks. Almost all of my free time, anytime I'm doing something where I can listen to music, in addition to whatever it is that I'm working on, I instead listen to audiobooks. I really like audiobooks on business and psychology, on self-improvement and things like that. And I listen to them non-stop. There are even a list of audiobooks that I'll listen to on repeat, usually once or twice a year. But most people, when they ask me, do you read, are actually asking a different question. They're asking, do you read what you write? Do you read fantasy? And the answer to that is sometimes. It's really tricky when you're in a creative field. It can be hard to consume the same thing you make. Part of the reason why it's hard is because you don't want to start copying what other people are doing. And once you get far enough in your creative process, it's actually detrimental to add too many ideas from other minds. When you're starting out, on the other hand, it's a great idea. You should copy everything you can and then tweak it to make it yours. I have an entire video on this about how you should be stealing like an artist, though I guess it would be better to say stealing like a writer. But the further along you get in your creative journey, the more you're going to realize that introducing other people's work into your mind, especially while you're in the midst of creating yourself, can be detrimental to the creative process. At least it is for me. And so I'll typically go really long periods of time without reading any other fiction. Now, I'm reading my own fiction because I'm writing it. And I write at just such a blistering pace that I don't have time for reading other people's work. And that's why I try to set aside time every few months, like a week or 2 weeks, and I just read. And during those periods, I read as much as I possibly can, usually like 2 to 3 books a day. See, I love reading. I grew up reading, and reading is really what led me to writing. There were particular ideas or tropes that I desperately wanted to see in the books that I was reading, and I couldn't find them. And so I decided, well, why don't I just try it myself? And then I fell in love with writing, and the rest is history. But again, the further I have gotten in my career and in my creative process, the more I've realized that I need these periods of isolation in order to be true to what I want to create. That isn't to say that I don't need to refill the well, so to speak. I do. I have to make sure that I'm consuming enough of other people's content that fresh ideas are being introduced. Otherwise, my writing gets stale. But I found that the most effective way for me is to use something called batching. And that's where you take tasks that are similar and you group them together. And so that's what I do. I spend a couple of months writing as much as I can. And then I spend a couple of weeks reading as much as I can. And then I go back to writing, and then I go back to reading. And, there's this cycle to it. The one downside to that is that often other people are talking about all of these really great books, and I just haven't read them because I haven't had time. This is what happens when you write 8 to 10 hours a day. You just don't really have time for other things. And who knows, maybe that's going to change in the future. Maybe I'll eventually get to the point where I'm not writing so much, or I figure out a good way to read and write at the same time. Another problem I have is that if I start reading a book, I cannot stop until it's done. I literally cannot stop. So if I'm in the middle of writing one of my own books and I start reading somebody else's book, if it's good enough to keep my attention, which I have to admit is a pretty high bar, but if it's good enough to keep my attention, then I literally just can't stop. I will read from morning to night and from night to morning. Every time my wife sees me sitting on the couch with a book, she sighs. And I always know what that sigh is. That is the sigh of, "You're not coming to bed, are you?" And nope, I'm not. I won't sleep. I won't eat. I won't play video games. I won't do anything until the book is done. And I don't know why that's how I consume books, but that's how it is. I remember once in high school going to a poker tournament at a friend's house. It was just like a casual thing with a bunch of people getting together. But we were playing for money, so there were real stakes involved. I think the grand prize was like a couple $100. And I was playing and I was doing pretty well. And then I saw that they had a copy of the latest Harry Potter and I hadn't read it. And so I picked it up and I started reading. And even though I was winning my table, I ended up just going all in on a terrible hand just so I could get out of the game and finish reading the book, which I did before the night was done. So that's sort of how I read. And because that's how I read, it is really disruptive to my creative process. But I'm curious about you, because we're all different. Do you read as you write? Do you find it helpful for refilling the well, so to speak? Or is it a disruption to your creative process? Let me know down in the comments below, and I'll catch you next time.